Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Emily and today we have my June and July wrap up. If you follow me on Twitter, then you know I recently got a new laptop and in the process of kind of transitioning out of my old one and getting the new one, I didn't have the chance to edit my June wrap up that I originally filmed. And then when I had the chance to do so, I went back and it was just like all over the place. It was not well done. So I figured I'm just gonna scrap that, roll it into my July wrap up, and here we are. Because of that, there are a lot of books to talk about because I did read a decent amount, especially in June. But in an effort to not make this 17,000 years long, I am going to actually time myself so that I only talk about each book for, I'll give myself a minute and a half. But anyway, I'm hoping that allows me to sort of speed through these. But to start, in June, I read all LGBTQIA+ books, so either with queer authors or characters or both. It was a great reading month. I read some really, really beautiful books and some that will definitely make it into my top books of the year, I'm thinking. And yeah, then July, I didn't really give myself much of a structure at all. Read-Telethon happened earlier on, and so I did attempt that. It went poorly, but anyway, I'm gonna stop rambling and jump into, first of all, my June reads. So the first book I read in June was The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue by Mackenzie Lee. I really liked this book. This is one that has been super hyped. It's about a young man named Monty who goes on a grand tour of Europe with his sister Felicity and his best friend and crush, Percy. They get into all sorts of trouble and hijinks, and it is quite the romp. It was very different than I was expecting. I also have to say, I didn't love Monty. I know a lot of people adore him. I found him to be kind of annoying and kind of selfish, and I don't know, he wasn't my favorite character. I loved Felicity. I thought she was so badass. I'm pumped that she's getting her own book later this year. But overall, it was definitely enjoyable. I thought the rep was amazing. I thought the love story and the sort of like unrequited love, more or less, storyline was really good. I thought it was funny. I didn't think it was like, I wasn't laughing out loud the entire time, but it was good. Overall, I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was not one that was in the LGBTQIA+ theme, but I had it from the library and I wanted to read it before it was due back, and that is The Wedding Date by Jasmine Guillory. This is a love story that follows our main characters Drew and Alexa as they meet in an elevator when it breaks down and decide to go to a wedding together. Drew is going to be in his ex's wedding. It's a whole deal. He doesn't have a date. Alexa agrees to go with him. And of course, as you might assume, it becomes a love story and they fall in love with each other. There's lots of graphic scenes. I mean, it's not horrible, but it's a lot. I thought it was really good. I thought the commentary on interracial couples was really interesting. Alexa's black and Drew is white, and he definitely has some assumptions that he needs to fight against, and I think she helps him do that. She's also a really powerful lady. She is the chief of staff for the San Francisco mayor, I think. So I thought that was awesome to have that within the story. It was good. I really, really enjoyed it. I ended up giving it, I think, 4.5 out of 5 stars. I teared up at the end. It's exactly what I wanted at the time I read it. The next book I read was They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera. Oh my gosh. Adam Silvera is an emotional, like, destroyer. I just don't know. This is the first Adam Silvera book that I read. I'm actually getting ready to start another one today, probably. But this was just, oh, I can't even describe how much I loved this. I was sobbing at multiple points. I also read this while Adam and I were in Europe on our vacation, so it was quite the emotional roller coaster. This is about two boys who live in a futuristic, near future America where on the day of your death you get a call from a company called Deathcast, essentially telling you that sometime in the next 24 hours you are going to die. Sort of an attempt to, you know, give yourself one last day to live your life as you want, say goodbye, all of that. It's really bleak. Obviously the title, you know what you're getting into, but man, the emotions in this book are insane. I found myself just in love with the two characters, Rufus and Mateo. They are just so charming, and it was lovely and heartbreaking, and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. The fourth book that I read was The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. This is a retelling of the Iliad. This follows Achilles and his companion slash lover Patroclus. And it's a really beautiful love story. It is very slow in the first like half, third maybe. I found myself not getting super into it right away. I thought I would be like all in from the get-go. That wasn't my experience. However, the second half was really amazing. It tells the story of sort of the lead up to the Trojan War and Achilles' education with Patroclus and getting ready for this battle that he is kind of like destined to win slash die in. It's a really cool take on this story, and it was a great retelling. It was very accessible. Like I said, the love story was so charming, but because it was kind of slow for me, I wasn't like totally gripped by it. I ended up giving it 3.5 out of 5 stars, but still really, really liked it. And the next one was an audiobook, and that is Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe by Benjamin O'Leary Sines. And the audiobook is read by Lin-Manuel Miranda, who is one of my favorite people of all time. This book is beautiful. I can't wait to reread this in like a physical copy because Sines has an amazing way with words. There were so many times I wish I could highlight, but it's just such a quietly lovely story. And there's another one on this list that I feel similarly about. This follows the story of 2 young Mexican-American boys who live in Texas, and it's kind of their sort of coming-of-age story and coming to discover their sexuality, and both in very different ways. And I thought the characters were just so real, and they felt very authentic, and they were so distinct from each other, which I really liked. I thought Lin-Manuel Miranda did a great job of reading this story, and like I said, I definitely want to reread it. I think I'll love it even more in a physical format, but even so, I ended up giving this 4.5 out of 5 stars. Oh. Next up, I listened to another audiobook called Beyond Magenta by, don't even remember the author's name, I'll drop it here. This is a nonfiction book about 6 transgender and gender nonconforming teens sharing their story, which I thought sounded fantastic. In reality, I felt like the author had several questions that she just asked each of these people, and kind of had things and experiences she wanted to hear about, but it didn't, I don't know, it didn't go deep, very deep. It felt like very surface level. There was a lot of talk about body image and fashion, and while that is part of gender expression and identity, there's so much more to it that could have been discussed, and not to mention it just wasn't written well. And I don't know if it was just that the author took the actual transcript of these interviews with these teens and then like copy pasted it into the book, but it was not, it just didn't feel like it was edited at all, and like there was incorrect grammar, which is really weird, and I hated that. I'm pausing the timer because I have one more thing that I want to say. The first story is, oh my gosh, so hard to read. This is about a trans man who is just very misogynistic. There were some really gross things said. He talked about how he basically, his girlfriend who he's dating now, or at least at the time of the interview, he saw her at the gym, approached her, and she said no, and basically he was like, oh, well, I'll try again, instead of just taking no for a freaking answer. I just don't really want to talk about this book anymore because it just gets me so angry. Not into it. I gave this 1 out of 5 stars. Next, I listened to We Are Okay by Nina LaCour. This is the other like quietly beautiful book that I was talking about. This is very character driven. There's not a lot of plot. It alternates in timelines between when our main character Marin is in her first year of college during her winter break, and then back to the summer before her freshman year. Marin has had some pretty tragic things happen to her, and that's all I'm gonna say because you don't really know what happened, because you know in the like present day she is dealing with a lot of like PTSD and just really hard emotions to work through, and then you kind of lead up to what happened in the other timeline. But yes, it's a lovely story between Marin and her best friend, whose name I'm blanking on, them sort of working through it together. And it's such a beautiful story of friendship. Overall, I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. Next, I have Down Among the Sticks and Bones by Seanan McGuire. This is book 2 of the Wayward Children series, so I am not going to go into much of a synopsis, but I loved this even more than the first one. And if you remember, I really loved the first one. It made it into my top 5 books of spring. And this one was just so interesting. So the series deals with kind of the stories of children who are coming back from other worlds. So it's kind of portal fantasy, and think like Chronicles of Narnia or Alice in Wonderland. But the first book is much more about this murder mystery that's going on at the home, at Eleanor West's home for wayward children. And so it's much more about that. You kind of get a look at what all these different worlds are like, but this one you actually really get that part of it. And that's the most interesting part of this series to me. Like I said, I'm not gonna go into it, but this one received 5 out of 5 stars from me, and I cannot wait to read the third one. And then the final book that I read in June was a buddy read with my friend Jocelyn over at Yogi with a Book, and that was Autobiography by Christina Lauren. I think Jocelyn and I both had really high expectations going into this book. It is a very beloved book here on BookTube. Some of my favorite booktubers refer to this as one of their favorite books of all time, but I just liked it. I feel pretty neutral about it. This is a story of Tanner, who moves from California, where he is an out bisexual teen, to small town Utah, Mormon town, where he needs to sort of go back into the closet and hide that part of his identity for fear of bullying and hatred from the community. But he falls in love with the bishop's son, Sebastian, and it is a love story. But I don't know. This was one that I had a lot of questions about at the end. I thought the ending was incredibly rushed, and I didn't understand why it switched to Sebastian's point of view for a hot second and then back to Tanner's, when the only thing we got the rest of the book was Tanner's point of view. 3 out of 5 stars. Yeah. Next up, we have my first book of Read-Telethon and another buddy read with my friend Allie from Miss Lynn Reads, and that was A Study in Charlotte by Brittany Cavallaro. This story follows the descendants of Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson. They are now peers at a boarding school in Connecticut, and they find themselves in the midst of a murder mystery at their school. Charlotte is a recreation of Sherlock Holmes. She definitely reads very similar to the Benedict Cumberbatch Sherlock character, which I liked. It felt a little too on the nose. I felt like there could have been a little bit more nuance to her character. Jamie Watson, the great whatever grandson of John Watson, I thought he was really sweet, and I totally see why Rocky from Blonde with a Book has a crush on him. He is lovely. I thought the characters were very true to what you'd expect of a Sherlock Holmes and Watson story. It didn't grip me like a lot of mysteries do. It is a YA mystery. I typically read adult mysteries, so maybe that's kind of where the disconnect was. I liked it. I thought it was a little predictable, however. So in the end, I gave this 3.5 out of 5 stars. And my next Read-Telethon read was Wonder Woman Warbringer by Leigh Bardugo. I loved this book. Oh my goodness. I didn't know really what to expect going into this. I mean, it's Leigh Bardugo, so I knew that I was gonna love that. This is the story of Diana, Wonder Woman, but she's never referred to in that name during this book, who sets herself on a mission to return a young girl named Aaliyah to the mortal world, and essentially it's like a save humanity type of story. It's such a great depiction of female friendship. The only thing I didn't like was that the ending felt a little drawn out. I was really invested in it. It's oh my gosh, what's gonna happen? And then it just did not happen soon enough. Felt like it dragged on a little bit, so there was definitely a pacing problem at the end. And one of my least favorite tropes was represented, and it's a spoiler, so I'm not gonna go into it, but that was kind of disappointing. But otherwise, I really enjoyed it, so I ended up giving this one 4 out of 5 stars. Next up, I read Girls Made of Snow and Glass by Melissa Basherdust. This is a retelling of Snow White and the Huntsman, which is not a story that I'm super familiar with. I'm much more familiar with the Disney Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs story. But this follows our main characters, Mina, who is sort of like a retelling of the evil queen slash stepmother, and Lynette, who is the Snow White character. And it was just a really interesting retelling. It was very unique. They were totally different than the characters from any of the movies or stories that I've read of Snow White. And I thought that was really well done. I do have a full blog post up for this one, so I will stop myself there. I really liked it. I ended up giving this one 4 out of 5 stars and would definitely be interested in reading more of this author, especially if she has other retellings. I'm really interested because I think she did a really very unique job writing this one, and so I'm curious to see what else she has. Next, I read An American Marriage by Tayari Jones. This is exactly what I needed. I felt like towards the middle of July I was just feeling like I had read a lot of YA, and I love me some good YA fantasy and contemporary and all of that, but I was in need of an adult book, and this was great. This is the story of a couple named Celestial and Roy who are newlyweds, and about a year into their marriage, Roy is falsely accused of and arrested for a crime that he did not commit. So he is sentenced to 12 years in prison, and it really obviously puts a strain on their relationship. Like I said, they'd only been married for about a year, and then suddenly Roy is taken away from her, and she sort of has to figure out how to navigate life from here. This is, again, a much more character-driven story. There's not a lot of plot. A lot of it is told in letters between Celestial and Roy and other people while he's in prison. I really love epistolary stories, so I loved that aspect of it, and it was just one that I haven't totally wrapped my mind around yet, but I'm definitely really happy I read it. I saw Kristen from Surreal and the Sunflowers recommend this, and after hearing her rave about this, I immediately requested it from the library, and it was great. I highly recommend it, and I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. And then finally, I read The Kiss Quotient by Helen Huang. This was so good. I read this in one day. I decided this past Saturday that I just wanted to sit down and read all day. So I first finished An American Marriage, and then I immediately picked this up, and you guys, I love romance, contemporary adult romances. I didn't realize that until I read The Hating Game earlier this year, but wow, this is great. This is a story of a young woman named Stella Lane who has autism and has a lot of social anxiety and does not feel comfortable in social situations. Her mom makes a comment that she's ready for Stella to basically get married and have babies, and Stella's terrified. She hates intimacy and sex in any way. It's always been horrible for her, so she decides she needs to practice. So she hires a male escort to essentially teach her how to be a lover. It's just charming, and I really liked both Stella and Michael. I thought they were really adorable. This had sort of the fake dating trope in it. It was very good. It was steamy for sure, but it was just so much fun to read. This has been getting a lot of hype, and it definitely lived up to the hype for me. This is just one that, purely based off of joy and emotion, I'm giving this 5 out of 5 stars. It feels very similar to how I felt with The Hating Game, where I'm sure if I nitpicked a little bit more, it would maybe not have quite as high a rating, but I just loved reading it, and to me, that's worth 5 stars. So I'm now realizing that I am trash for contemporary adult romances. And then I do also want to mention that I have recently started listening to the Harry Potter audiobooks. So as you might have noticed, I didn't have any audiobooks that I mentioned in July because I have been working my way through Harry Potter. I started Sorcerer's Stone at the very beginning of the month, and I'm loving it. I am just about to finish Goblet of Fire, so I mean, obviously, they all get 5 stars. I love them, you love them, I hope, but I just felt I was in need of a reread of Harry Potter, and I've never listened to the audiobooks, so this has been such a joy. I love it so much. But anyway, thank you so much for being here. I hope you enjoyed watching this extra lengthy wrap up. If you want to keep the conversation going, you can leave me a comment down below, or you can find all of the links to my social media accounts in the description box. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to my channel so you know when my next video goes up. But until then, happy reading. Bye.